would happen if you met somebody? Let's say you were on a blind date. And you went off to a restaurant together, and whilst you were busy chit-chatting with them, you bumped over your glass of wine. What would happen if your new blind date said to you, "Oh my God, you are such a klutz. What an idiot. I can't believe you bumped over that glass of wine. Are you always this clumsy?" How would you feel about that? Would you be thinking, "My friend, speak to the hand, do not call me, I will not call you"? Or are you thinking, "Oh, this is a wonderful person, I really want to have a relationship with them"? Now think about how you speak to yourself. When you bump over your glass of wine, do you say to yourself, "Oh, you're such a klutz, what an idiot, are you always so clumsy, why are you always so clumsy, what the hell is wrong with you, oh, you're so embarrassing, this is terrible, this is dreadful"? Or do you say to yourself, "Never mind, it's just a glass of wine, quick, let's dab it up, they make wine every day"? You see, often we learn to speak to ourselves in a way that we would never find acceptable to speak to somebody else, or for somebody else to speak to us. And yet, we think it's okay to speak to ourselves in that way. Well, that kind of talk is abusive. And that kind of talk keeps you locked into a relationship with yourself that is unloving and unkind. And an unloving, unkind relationship is very, very, very difficult to create self-esteem in. How can you like yourself when you keep talking to yourself like that? How can you respect yourself when you're constantly putting yourself down? How is it even possible to have a great sense of "I'm okay" when there's a voice going on in your head telling you constantly you're not okay? Quite often we blame our self-esteem on the things that other people say to us, on the way that our parents treat us, our siblings, our preachers and teachers. We think that the reason that we don't love ourselves is because they let us believe that we weren't good enough. They told us we were not good enough. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes people have said to us, "You're not good enough. Your behavior is unacceptable. I don't like you." But how many times have you told yourself that? More than other people have told you? Much more? 100 billion thousand times more? So think about how you treat yourself and how you speak to yourself, because this is a really, really big issue, self-esteem. It is very, very difficult to think of yourself as a good, wonderful, interesting, useful, worthy, lovable person if you've constantly got a voice in your head that's telling you you're not, you're not, you're not. So when it comes to self-esteem, you have to choose. You have to choose what you allow the voice in your head to say to you. And that is choosing every day to have good self-esteem, is choosing to shut that voice up, to shut that voice down, to have that voice say something kinder, more loving, more affectionate, more accepting towards you. In order to have great self-esteem, we have to accept ourselves the way we are. So if sometimes you bang over a glass of wine, that needs to be completely acceptable to you in order to have great self-esteem. Nobody wants to bump over a glass of wine. Nobody wants to fail at a project. Nobody wants to do something that's embarrassing. Nobody wants to do something that is potentially hurtful to somebody else. But the fact of the matter is we all do it. At some point, we all do it. And because we all do it, we all have the potential to beat ourselves up. Or we all have the potential to live with it and realize, well, I'm not perfect. And if I'm not perfect and I accept that I'm not perfect, then I can be more kind and more gentle to myself when I'm not perfect. So what would be more appropriate when you bump over the glass of wine, or you fail at a project, or you don't manage to succeed in your goal? I'm not asking you to say the opposite to yourself. I'm asking you to monitor and take care of what you say to yourself. So when you hear that critical voice in your head that is almost certainly there, that almost certainly speaks to you in an ugly and disrespectful way, saying that kind of thing, all you need to do is stop it. I'm not going to listen to that. That's not acceptable. I don't speak to myself like that. And that is choosing not to have that voice in your head doing that thing. Now, you're going to have a voice talking in your head all the time. I mean, don't pretty much always live with a running commentary. So to choose to not have that voice speaking nasty to yourself means that you have to choose to allow that voice to learn a different way of speaking to you, to say something else. Some people will tell you that what you need to have the voice say is the opposite. I think that's unlikely to work. The opposite of, I'm such a klutz, I'm such an idiot, is, oh, I'm so fantastic, I'm so clever, which I'm not going to think when I bump over my glass of wine, or I fail a project, or I don't do what it is that I want to do. So when I say something that is the opposite, it feels disingenuous. And so it's all wrong, and so it doesn't work, and it's completely dismissed, and it's completely wasted and useless to us. So what you have to do really is just catch yourself saying the thing that is hurtful and painful, stopping that. I don't say that to myself, I don't treat myself like that. And say something just a little loving and just a little encouraging. It's okay. We'll get another glass of wine. Don't worry, we can solve this problem. All right, I messed up. I'll do better next time. Just a little loving and a little encouraging. And if you could go a little further and say, it's okay, my darling, they make glasses of wine every day. Or don't stress so much. This is fixable. I love you. Then you've got even one more step towards nurturing yourself and taking care of yourself into an expression and a feeling of I'm worthy and I'm okay. So step number 1, when it comes to internal dialogue, is listen to what you're saying to yourself. Find those statements that you constantly use with yourself. Become aware of what your internal dialogue is. And once you have the awareness, notice how it makes you feel, and when you feel that feeling, shut it down immediately. Shut it down and replace it with something that is more gentle, more loving, and more kind. Just the way that you would speak to somebody else. If somebody else bashes over their glass of wine, you'd say, don't worry, we can take care of this, I'll get you another glass of wine, it's not the end of the world. Why can't you say that to yourself? Why not? Try that and see what happens. So one of the primary things that you have to develop in order to start changing the way that your brain works and the way that you speak to yourself and the way that you treat yourself and the way that you filter information and the way that you move through the world in terms of self-esteem is you have to develop awareness. And I call this development of awareness, developing the internal observer. So for me, the internal observer is like a character in my brain. It's a part of me, but it's kind of a separate part of my brain that looks at the rest of my brain. So the brain that it's looking at is the chattering monkeys going on and on, living their day, yabba 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 yabba, completely unaware, but still going and going and going. Sometimes positive stuff, sometimes negative stuff, sometimes fantasizing, sometimes thinking of something, sometimes coming up with a solution or a plan or a new idea. It doesn't matter. That's just chatting away non-stop, yab 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 yab. And the internal observer is the part of my brain that stands by and observes. It just watches what's going on with me. And this is one of the reasons why meditation is considered such an amazing skill, because meditation is the skill that you use to develop the internal observer. So meditation is about observing your thoughts, noticing when you've gone off into thinking, and observing that, bringing yourself back to the mantra or the breathing or the observing the flame or whatever it is that you're using for your particular meditation. So meditation is the practice of developing a strong internal observer. And the internal observer looks for one thing, and that thing is feeling bad. So it doesn't matter if you're off in a fantasy and you're imagining your holiday in Mauritius, and it doesn't matter if you're busy doing a marketing strategy while you're having a bath, and it doesn't, that's all very well. But as long as you're not feeling bad, that's not the end of the world. Better if you were present, but it's not the end of the world. What the internal observer is looking for is, what do I feel bad about? So let's say, for instance, something happens, you have a big project at work and it's you're running behind time. When you start the internal dialogue, I'm not good enough, this is never going to work out, I'm going to be in so much trouble, nothing I ever do works, I'm such an idiot, blah, 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 and you start feeling that feeling of not being good enough and not being okay in the world, that's what the internal observer is watching for. And when the internal observer notices that feeling, that is the awareness that we're looking for that will help to shift the brain into a different experience of life, a different way of functioning. So in the short term, the observer notices bad feeling and notices what is causing bad feeling. And the observer is able to question that bad feeling. Is it true? Is it true that I'm such a loser? Is it true that everything's going to hit the fan? Is it true that I need to feel like this about myself? But most importantly, it's the part of the brain that watches what's going on. It's the part of the brain that pays attention to what's happening inside the rest of your brain, so that you develop the strong sense of awareness of what's going on with me. Low self-esteem is habitual behavior, habitual thinking, habitual patterns of dealing in the brain. In order to get great self-esteem, in order to start to learn to love yourself, those patterns have to be changed. They cannot be changed unless they can be observed. So developing the internal observer helps you to observe those patterns, observe those thinkings, so that you can then shift them. So what I'd really like you to do is start to develop a good, strong internal observer. So how do you go about developing an internal observer? It's not difficult. What you do is you notice when you're feeling bad, and instead of carrying on with whatever's going on in your brain that makes you feel bad, you pay attention to the fact that you feel bad. That's all. Just notice, I feel like this, I feel like this, I feel like that. And there's a lot of techniques for practicing this, actually. You could start to meditate every day. I meditate twice a day in the TM way, 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. You can start to notice where you are every now and again. Just stop what you're doing and pay attention. Where am I? What is the environment? What does it feel like in my body? What is my emotional state? You can start to pay attention to your thinking, especially your thinking when you start to feel unhappy, sad or uncomfortable. But you're thinking when you're feeling fabulous and wonderful and happy, when you're feeling neutral. What is my thinking? What is my emotional state? Just every now and again checking. So let's say, for instance, you put a little reminder on your cell phone to bing you every 25 minutes or every half an hour, and when that thing goes bing, you just check in with yourself. How am I feeling? What's going on with my conversation in my brain? What am I thinking about? How does that make me feel? So you're picking up your own dialogue, and you're becoming aware and noticing your own dialogue. And the more you practice, the better you'll become at being aware of your dialogue and what's going on for you in terms of the conversation that's going on in your head. And when you become aware of the conversation that's going on in your head, that's when you can start to change it. So I've been talking a lot about the brain and how it's necessary to shift the way that you think and to change the way that you do things in terms of how your thinking works, how your judgment works, how you speak to yourself, how you see the world. And there's one way to really help you to do that. And I'd really like you to start to engage in this method on a daily basis. And that is meditation. Now, why is it useful to meditate? Well, what I'm asking you to do in order to get great self-esteem is to change the way that you think. Now, in order to change the way that you think, you must have awareness of how you think. And so the internal observer, listening to how you speak to yourself, noticing how you think, listening to the self-judgment, noticing what words you use with yourself, how you're judging yourself, how you're speaking to yourself, how you're treating yourself. That is awareness. And that awareness is absolutely critical, because without awareness, you can't change anything. You have to be aware of your processes in order to change your processes. And the moment you have a process that is not in line with self-esteem and creating a sense of self-love and self-worth, you have to notice it immediately so that you can start to change it. Now this takes practice. Your brain has been trained for who knows how long to think in the way that you think. Like learning to ride the bicycle, you've taught yourself to think in this way. And this way supports a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-love, a lack of feeling good enough. So now you have to retrain the brain. And in order to retrain the brain, you have to notice when you're doing it wrong. I'm a badminton player. I know no one's ever heard of badminton. Anyway, I love badminton. It's a favorite sport of mine. But I only started playing badminton when I was in my mid-20s. That's about 20 years ago. And because I was already an adult, more or less, when I started playing badminton, I never had any badminton coaching. In this country, badminton's not a very popular sport. They only coach the kids, and there was no opportunity or way for me to get coaching. And the only way I could ever get to learn something new was to either observe somebody else who played a shot well and try to mimic that shot, or to go and ask them, how do you play that shot? And most people haven't got a cooking clue how they play the shot, so it's very difficult for them to teach me how to play that shot. So I literally played a really bad backhand clear shot for years and years and years. And what I understood about that is really that I learned to play badminton in a sort of a by default way. And actually I'm quite good at badminton, so my by default way wasn't too bad, and my ability to observe wasn't too bad, and my ability to ask people, how do you do that, what do I need to know, wasn't bad. But there are some really big fundamentals that I never learned when I started playing badminton. A few months ago I discovered that there is badminton coaching on YouTube. What a glorious, glorious day that was. There's amazing badminton coaching on YouTube. And so, of course, I became obsessed with watching YouTube videos to learn how to play various new techniques that I hadn't been able to do before. And then I discovered that actually there weren't just new techniques that I hadn't been able to do before. There were a lot of things that I was doing in my sort of learn by default way that were not ideal. And while I was stuck in doing them, and I was a fairly good badminton player doing those things, they were not the best way to do what I wanted to do. So they weren't the best way to play a drop, or the best way to clear a shot, or the best way certainly to play a backhand. And so in order to learn how to do the best way, I have discovered that I've got to unlearn what it is that I've been doing for 20 years. Now let me tell you, it's not always easy to unlearn what you've been doing for 20 years. Because 20 years becomes a habit. The habit of riding the bicycle, the habit of tying your shoelaces. It's so instinctive after a while that you cannot really process what you're doing anymore. It's hard to think about what you're doing unless you've got a very, very specific and sharp awareness that you put into what it is that you're doing. So I have to become once again aware of my body and a learner in a new shot. So I go and I train with my coach, and we play a new shot, and we play a new shot, and 10 times later we're playing that shot, and 100 times later we're starting to get that shot right, and we go back next week and we play that shot, and we do it another 100 times, and it's starting to feel a bit more natural, and we go back the next week and we play it another 100 times, and it starts to feel like I know how to play that shot. And then I go and play a game. And in my game, I go back to all my old bad habits, and I play all the shots in the old way. Because while I'm in the game, I don't have the same awareness that I have when I'm coaching. It's very hard to be in the game, in the flow of the game, and have the awareness that I have in the coaching. So then I notice somewhere along the line that I'm playing my old habitual shots in the game, and at some point during the game I try to correct that, and then I play really, really, really badly because I'm busy trying to play the old shot and the new shot at the same time. And it doesn't work so well, so it kind of trashes my game. And then I go back to coaching, and another week, and we play the shot again, we play it again, another 100 times, and another 100 times, and another 100 times, until eventually this becomes the habit of my body, to play that shot in that way, to drop in exactly that way. And slowly but surely, that new way of playing that shot creeps into my game unconsciously. So in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, I use it a lot in my coaching. We talk about unconscious incompetence. So my 20 years of playing in a specific way, unconscious that there was another way of playing, that was unconscious incompetence. And then I learned that that wasn't the best way to do it. And I realized that I was consciously incompetent. So I became consciously incompetent. I know now that that's not the best shot. However, my habitual state takes me to that shot every time. And then I start to learn a new shot and learn a new shot and practice, and so I become consciously competent. That's it, consciously competent. So I play enough of that shot until when I'm thinking about playing that shot in that way, I can do it. So in my training, I can do it, boom, easy, perfect little drop, boom, boom, 100 times, fantastic. I can play consciously competent. And it's only eventually, and I've done it enough so that it sets up this neural pathway that it becomes habitual, that I can be unconsciously competent. So that I don't have to think about the shot and I will always naturally play it that way. But in the meantime, I've had to learn this new shot till it becomes the habit. And so that the old shot is less and less used, the neural pathway of that old shot is less and less used. And by being less and less used, it becomes less and less the default of what I do. And the new shot becomes the default, the habit of what I do. Until the habit of what I do is much more habitual than the habit of what I used to do, and I no longer do what I used to do. And this is how self-esteem training works. So what you need to learn now is to become consciously incompetent. Consciously competent and unconsciously competent. And that's what you have to do with self-esteem as well. So this is about awareness. This is about learning to see what you're doing, consciously incompetent, correct what you're doing, consciously competent, and those two live together. Oh, I did it wrong, correct. Oh, I did it wrong, correct. Oh, I did it wrong, correct. Practice being consciously competent until you will naturally consciously do it correctly, and then become unconsciously competent so that you're doing it automatically correctly. And when you become unconsciously competent at the way that you need to think in order to have great self-esteem, then you will unconsciously and naturally just have great self-esteem. So the brain works the same if you're learning something physical than if you're learning something mental or emotional. And so back to why I want you to meditate. Meditation is about training the brain for the awareness part so that it can notice and become conscious of the incompetence and then conscious to competence so that eventually you can become unconsciously competent. And why does meditation work for that? Well, the point of meditation is to just notice when your brain shifts away into the monkey brain thinking. And as you notice that it has shifted, to bring it back to where you want it to be. So you're saying, I know that my brain thinks, I know that it wanders into habitual pathways. In fact, I saw a YouTube video the other day that said that 90% of what we think of every day, we thought of yesterday. The same thoughts yesterday as today. And the same thoughts again tomorrow. So this is what we're trying to change. So your brain is doodling about, doing its thinking. And when you're meditating, that's happening also. Doodling about, thinking. But the meditating brain is practicing the internal observer. So it's practicing noticing that it's doodling about doing some thinking, unconsciously. And when it notices it, then we bring our thinking back to thinking about your mantra, thinking about the flame, thinking about your breathing, whatever meditation it is that you're doing, thinking about your body scan. It doesn't really matter what you do, so long as it is a particular focus that you've chosen to do. So your internal observer has awareness which is what we're trying to practice, and then brings you back to thinking about one thing, which is what the control that we're trying to practice. What is the thinking that we want? The practice of thinking what we want to think. And then the brain drifts off and starts doodling again, and we notice and bring it back to the one thing that we wanted to do, the practice of thinking what we wanted to think. And then it doodles, we bring it back, we do it, and this is the whole meditation. Doodle, bring it back, doodle, bring it back, doodle, bring it back. And there's a myth around meditation that if I was meditating correctly, or if I was a good meditator, then I would just have a clear mind. There'd be absolutely nothing in there. Well, that may be true for people who've been meditating successfully for 50 years. But it's not going to be true if you're learning meditation, or if probably if you're meditating for the first 10 years of your life. I don't know, I'm certainly not there. So what's important here is not to judge that state, not to be upset or unhappy or worry that you're not meditating right or that you're not doing a good job, but to know that that is actually the purpose of your meditation. The mind drifts, you return it to the point of focus. The mind drifts, you return it to the point of focus. This is the practice of awareness. It's the practice of training your brain to be aware of what you're thinking, and it's the practice of returning your brain to what you wanted to think about. And that is why it's necessary or valuable to meditate as part of learning how to have great self-esteem. Because a really well-trained brain is a brain that we can reprogram successfully. So part of the practice of reprogramming is the practice of training the brain so it can be reprogrammed. So I recommend that you start to meditate pronto. I meditate twice a day. It is not necessary to meditate twice a day. I meditate for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. It is not necessary to meditate for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. You may do as suits you. The way that you meditate, whether it's focusing on the body, whether it's focusing on the breath, whether you have a mantra, it doesn't matter. Choose one, do that thing. If you are meditating to a CD and somebody's doing a guided meditation, fantastic. Do that thing. When you find that your brain drifts away from the voice, take it back and listen. So it doesn't matter how you go about meditating, but it is important to meditate. Some people find it easier if they go to a meditation course. I recommend it. Find a meditation course and attend. Because we have these doubts in ourselves that we're doing it right, and when we doubt that we're doing it right, we give up. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to give up. So here's my challenge for you. Meditate for at least 10 minutes a day. Sit down, find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed, and pay attention to a single thing. When your thoughts drift from that single thing, bring them gently, lovingly, and calmly, not with irritation, not with I'm no good, not with judgment, just gently, calmly, and lovingly back to your point of focus. Your mind will drift. Bring it back. Don't judge that drifting. It's part of the learning, it's part of the process. And just focus on that one thing. My challenge to you, at least 10 minutes every day. Ideally, 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour a day, if you can. My suggestion, do it at the same time every day, in the morning or in the evening. Why? Because if you don't set aside the time to do it, you're probably not going to do it at all. Meditation's a really good training. I suggest you go about it. So when I'm speaking about self-judgment, I spoke a little bit about this idea that I need to judge myself in order to do better. And I have to do better in order to be lovable and worthy and confident and have self-esteem and have self-love. And there's a really big problem with that. Because if I were to ask you right now, how much better do you have to do? How much better do you have to be? How different do you have to be in order to allow yourself to be okay? In order for you to say, oh no, it's okay now. Now I'm okay. I've got enough money. I have enough cars. I'm pretty enough now. My hair isn't curly. My hair isn't straight. My waist isn't big. My husband isn't poor. I have 2.5 children. I'm married. How different do you have to be before you can say to yourself, oh, now I can love myself. Now I can have self-esteem. The belief that you have to be different, something else, something better, before that you can be lovable. This belief is a problem. As long as you hold it to be true that you're not okay as you are, you will never be okay as you are. So this is a bit of a quandary. I recognize that this is a bit of a quandary because right now, any one time and space, most people with low self-esteem do not feel like they're good enough to be loved, do not feel like they are lovable or worthy or are good enough to have esteem or confidence about themselves. So what are you going to do? How are you going to get the shift from I need to be better in order to be lovable and to the point where you can find yourself lovable? Well, I can tell you for an absolute fact that if you need something different from what you have right now, in this moment, in order to be lovable, in order to be happy and joyful in your life, in order to love yourself and to have self-esteem or a sense of self-worth, then you are out of luck. If you need something to be something else than what it is right now to have those things, then you will never have those things. Never. Because I can guarantee that you haven't even got an idea of how much better you need to be. So you're chasing a moving target. If I was thinner, then I would love myself. Well, most people who have weight difficulties have been thinner at some point. They probably yo-yo dieted up and down between their goal weight and whatever they are now many, many times. If you've done that, tell me this. When you reached your goal weight, did you suddenly find that everything was sorted and you loved yourself? That everything was good in the world and you had great self-esteem and great sense of self-worth? It seems unlikely to me. Why? Because if in that moment you had great self-esteem and great self-worth, you would not have put the weight back on again, ever. Much less on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. You see, we've somehow managed to give ourselves this idea that I need to be something other than what I am. And as long as you hold that idea to be true, you will never have great self-esteem. So how do you then get great self-esteem? Well, this is the art and the trick of great self-esteem. This is the important stuff. So pay attention. In order to have great self-esteem, in order to love yourself, in order to have self-worth, the most important thing that you can do for yourself is to choose to accept the way you are right now and love yourself anyway. Acceptance of what you are, a willingness to be who you are, what you are, and choosing to love yourself anyway. And choosing to respect yourself anyway. And choosing to treat yourself kindly, gently, and with unconditional love anyway is the only way that you can move forward into having a good relationship with yourself. And part of that good relationship, self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence, and self-love. Now that's a pretty tricky concept to get your head around, I know. Because you've probably spent your life thinking that you had to do better and be better. Somewhere people have told you you must do better and be better, constantly striving to do better and be better, so that you'll be okay. Well, just take a moment. Take a moment to think about loving yourself anyway. Let's think about this from a different angle for a moment. You must have people people that you love in your life, right? There must be people that you respect and admire. There must be people that you know. I'm not talking about people that you don't know. I'm talking about people that you know, that you respect and admire, and that you're capable of loving. Ask yourself this. Are those people perfect? Are they better? Is there anything about them that's not perfect, that's not better? Do they fail? Are they sometimes not fabulous? Do you respect them anyway? Can you love them anyway? Can you give them unconditional acceptance anyway? You see, my experience of clients with self-esteem is that they have many people in their lives that they're able to love quite unconditionally. But those people are not perfect, and they never will be perfect. And they are not required to be perfect in order to love them unconditionally. If you have children, consider your children. Those little brats are far from perfect. And they probably never will be. But you love them anyway. You have no expectation for them to be better than what they are. They're okay as they are. What would happen if you could love yourself in that same way? If you could see yourself in the way that you see somebody that is beloved to you, even though they're not perfect, even though they've got their faults, even though they fail at stuff, even though they sometimes mean or rude or stupid or irritable or moody, and you love them anyway. What would happen if you could treat yourself in the same way as that? Think about somebody who's perfect or that appears to be perfect. Have you ever met anybody who just seems to be so perfect? They're quite intimidating, aren't they? They're actually quite hard to love, perfect people. In fact, I've never met a person who appears to be perfect, who was lovable. And you know why? Because perfect people are so busy pretending to be perfect that they can't open their hearts to you. They can't experience a relationship with you because they're so busy faking perfect. They're too scared to let you see who they really are, to really connect, because they're too busy being perfect. And, of course, if you have low self-esteem or even mediocre self-esteem, you probably spend half your life judging yourself against them, feeling less than, and not enjoying spending time with them at all. So, if you were that kind of perfect, would that make you more lovable or less lovable? You lived in this myth, perhaps, that if you were more perfect, you would be more lovable to yourself. And perhaps you've lived in this myth that other people would love you more if you were more perfect. But I want you to just take a moment to think about the people who you do love. And think about how, when they're able to show their vulnerability, when they're able to express their lack of perfection, when they're able to be real and authentic, how much more lovable they are, how much more you can connect and relate to them. Because we're able to accept a lack of perfection in other people. We're able to accept people as they are sometimes, quite often. And the more we are able to accept them as they are, the more we're able to just love them as they are. So what would happen if you could just accept you as you are and just choose to give you that kind of love as you are, in this moment, in this day, and in that moment that's coming, and tomorrow and all of your tomorrows. If you could just say, this is me. This is fully me. Self-esteem requires unconditional acceptance. The willingness to unconditionally accept yourself as you are in this moment. Until you're able to do that, you will never have great self-esteem. So think about what that would be for you, how that would feel for you. To just let go of all these requirements, all this need to be different, to be better, to be something else. And to just shake it off and say, what about if I could just love myself? Here, now, in this moment. Maya Angelou wrote a beautiful book, Dance, I think it was called, Dance. In that book was this most amazing passage. She was having a dream. And in that dream, she was with a wise woman, and the wise woman said to her, you know, the problem is not that you can so infrequently be the person that you would like to be. The problem is that you so infrequently want to be the person that you are. Why don't you want to be the person that you are? Why can't you be the unique individual that you are and love that? Something to think about, huh? So if you've been watching this video series about self-esteem, self-love, self-acceptance, self-awareness, and you've been finding it useful for yourself, and you'd really like to have some help in the self-esteem journey, I invite you to come and work with me. I'm a self-esteem coach. It's what I do every day with my clients. Normally I coach one-on-one. I also sometimes do group work and workshops. So if it's too expensive for you to coach one-on-one, then you can join one of our groups or workshops. But I invite you to come and really experience the journey of moving from self-hate, lack of joy, lack of peace, lack of confidence, of moving away from fear and anxiety and worry about what other people think, into a really true expression of yourself. Since I learned to have great self-esteem myself, I have found that my life is quite a different thing from what it used to be. My life is an expression of the true me, the authentic me. And it's a really joyful and beautiful place to be. And I really wish that for you. So if you'd like some help in that journey, I use wonderful techniques, neuro-linguistic programming, kinesiology, all sorts of various coaching methods that are really amazing to step you forward out of this unconscious programming and into a new expression and a new experience of yourself. And how long it takes, well, that depends on the individual. It depends on your awareness of yourself. It depends on where you're starting from. It depends on your experiences and how you became stuck in a lack of self-esteem. It depends on your willingness to give up being a victim and to give up self-judgment and to give up this pressure that you put on yourself to be more, this belief that you have to be more. So it depends on you, but it is doable. It's totally doable. I know because I've been there myself and I've done it. And I have many, many clients who have done it with me too. And if you'd like to see some testimonials, you can visit my website and go and have a look at some of the testimonials of my various clients who've worked for me. So if you'd like to work one-on-one with me, all you need to do is give me a call, send me an email, and we'll set up an appointment to meet to see how well suited we are to working together. And from there, we can go into a program of reprogramming, retraining your brain to create that capacity to really love yourself and live joyfully in every day. Who knows? This may be your only experience of life. Maybe you'll come back for another life. Who knows? But this opportunity that you have right now, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could make the most of it in terms of just loving this life, of really experiencing joy and happiness and connection in this life, instead of being fearful and unhappy and scared? So that's what self-esteem, what learning to reprogram your brain to love yourself and have great self-worth and a great confidence and a great self-esteem will do for you. I look forward to hearing from you if you'd like to take this journey further. Until then, have a beautiful, beautiful day.